Okay, hello everyone. Uh, we are going to do your guys' first lecture on Article 1, which is the legislative branch. So once again, I would encourage you guys to take notes on this lecture, very similar to the foundational documents test. I drew quite a few of the questions on your guys' assessment from my lecture with foundational documents, and I plan on doing the same thing with the legislative branch test that you guys will eventually have. A lot of the questions are going to be coming from this lecture and assignments that we have with during the legislative branch unit. So once again, I highly encourage you guys to take notes. You will be allowed to use those notes for the test. And so what I recommend is and the reason why I'm doing these recorded is so that when I get to a new screen or when I get to a new slide, you can pause the video, write down what's on the slide, and then unpause it and you can listen. Because I know for myself, it was always difficult to take notes and listen at the same time, although that's what you need to learn how to do at a university. But for this class, I want to give you guys a chance to pause the video and then take notes so that you can write and then listen instead of having to do both at the same time. So hopefully you remember from our previous unit dealing with foundational documents, one of the issues with the Articles of Confederation was that it created a unichamber Congress. So there was only one house. And when the Constitution was finally ratified, the Constitution created a bicameral Congress. So there are now two chambers of our Congress. There is a House and there is a Senate. Both chambers play a part in the legislative process, but although both play a part in the legislative process, they each have their own kind of distinct powers. And so this is a way to build in checks and balances, not just between the branches, so not just between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, but with creating this bicameral Congress, there's also checks and balances that are built in between the two houses, the House and the Senate. So beginning with the House, it's often referred to as the lower house of Congress. The Senate is referred to as the upper house of Congress. It's seen as being closer to the people because instead of individuals electing a senator, which represents the entire state, you can only elect representatives from your district. So they're supposed to be more in touch with the people and closer to the people. The term for a representative is 2 years, although because it is so short, oftentimes what we see happening is that after somebody wins an election, within a couple of months, they're already starting to campaign for their next election because it is such a quick turnaround. So some of the qualifications to be a member of the House of Representatives, you have to be at least 25 years old, which is kind of crazy to me. I turned 27 on the 3rd of December, and to me, it's kind of crazy to think like, wow, somebody 2 years younger than me can be elected to the United States House of Representatives and can play a part in determining the bills that get passed in the United States Congress, because I see 25 as being still really, really young. But nonetheless, 25 years old to be eligible, you have to have been a citizen for 7 years at least, and you must be a resident of the state that you are representing. So the number of representatives in the House is 435. It's been that way since I want to say like 1911. So we've had 435 members in the House of Representatives for quite a long time. The head of the House of Representatives is known as the Speaker of the House. Currently, our current Speaker of the House is a lady named Nancy Pelosi. She is a Democrat from California. I believe she is the first ever woman Speaker of the House, although she first became Speaker of the House, I want to say in either 2008 or 2010. And then the Democrats lost control of the House sometime during Obama's years. And then in 2018, the Democrats retook control of the House and Nancy Pelosi became the Speaker of the House once again. We just had another election this previous November. The Democrats did retain the House of Representatives, so they still are in control of the House of Representatives, although they did lose seats, so their majority is not quite as large. It looks like Nancy Pelosi will probably be voted as the Speaker of the House again by the Democrats, although she did say that this is going to be her last term, because she is rather old. I think she's in her upper 70s, so she's been around for a long time. The Speaker of the House does have quite a few powers to them. Most specifically, they get to decide members that get to sit on committees. They also get to determine what bills are going to be heard and in which order, or if a bill doesn't even reach the floor of the House. So the Speaker of the House plays a decisive role and a powerful role in Washington, D.C., especially in seating committee members and heads of committees, as well as determining what gets heard on the floor. So on top of that, they also have power of the purse. So what that means is that any bill relating to taxes or revenue must originate in the House. So the Senate can't introduce a bill that deals with taxes or revenue. It must originate in the House of Representatives. Additionally, if there's ever a tie in the Electoral College, the House of Representatives gets to decide who the next president is going to be, if there is going to be a tie. And then additionally, if there is ever an impeachment, articles of impeachment have to be brought up in the House. The Senate cannot bring up articles of impeachment. That must begin in the House. So moving on to the Senate, the second House of Congress, or the upper house of Congress, the term is longer. A term for a senator is actually longer than the term for a president. A senator's term is every 6 years. The qualifications are a bit different. You must be older, so you must be at least 30 years old to be a senator. You have to have been a citizen for 9 years, and once again, you must be a resident of the state. So the Senate is supposed to be seen as, originally, it was the more aristocratic house of our Congress. And so the way that it originally worked, representatives were chosen by the state legislature. So today, what we do is the people, once again, get to vote on who the senator is. The way that it worked according to the Constitution, I believe until 1913, I think is when it was changed. The way that it originally worked is that the state legislatures get to choose who the senators were. The number of senators is 100, so it's 2 for every state. The head of the Senate is the vice president, although the vice president only gets involved in the Senate whenever there is a 50-50 split. And so whenever there's a 50-50 split, the vice president then gets to cast the deciding vote. The Speaker of the Senate is a man named Mitch McConnell. He's been the Speaker for, I think, since 2014, although there are 2 very, very important Senate races that will occur in January. And those 2 Senate races are going to determine which party has control over the Senate. So there are 2 runoff elections in Georgia, and currently the Republicans sit at 50 seats in the Senate, and the Democrats are at 46. But there are 2 independents, Bernie Sanders and Angus King, who overwhelmingly vote with the Democrats almost all the time. So really, at the moment, it's pretty much 50-48 for the Republicans. But like I said, there are 2 Senate races in Georgia that the nation is really paying a lot of attention to, because if the Democrats win both, it will be a 50-50 Senate, which will basically give the power of the Senate to the Democrats, because then Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be the deciding vote. So like I said, the nation is really looking at these 2 runoff Senate races in Georgia. So the Speaker of the Senate also gets to decide committee members for the Senate. They get to decide, very similarly to the Speaker of the House, what order bills are debated, and they also get to decide if they're the hearings that they're going to give. So once again, this is a big deal if the Republicans control the Senate for the incoming Biden administration. because if President-elect Biden nominates some, and they've already come out with some of their cabinet um, nominations. So individuals who President-elect Joe Biden has selected to run a department or an agency, those need to be confirmed by the Senate. And if Republicans have control of the Senate, if they don't like someone, and there already has been some discussion, there's already been a few names that President-elect Biden has nominated, that there have been Republicans that have publicly come out and rebuked those, or essentially rejected those nominees, saying we will not vote for them. So if enough Republicans come out and voice their displeasure with some nominees, it's possible, even though it would be kind of going against tradition. Traditionally, you are supposed to allow the president to nominate the cabinet that he wants. But it is legally speaking, although it would be going against tradition, legally speaking, Mitch McConnell can say, we're not even going to give this, we're not going to give this person a hearing. So don't nominate somebody else, because if you nominate this person, we're not even going to give them a vote. We're not even going to give them a hearing to be confirmed. So the one, very, very similarly to the Speaker of the House, the Speaker of the Senate wields a significant power in DC. So some powers that the Senate has, they get to approve all treaties. So this is, once again, this is kind of a separation of power, or checks and balances. So the executive, the president, gets to negotiate treaties with foreign governments, but those treaties do not become law until the Senate approves them. So even if the president of the United States negotiates a treaty that he or she likes, if the Senate does not ratify it, then that treaty does not become a law. One really famous example of this is in the aftermath of World War I. President Wilson negotiated the League of Nations, which is essentially the United Nations before the United Nations. And he was a big proponent of the League of Nations, and he came back to the United States, and there was a Republican Senate, and the Republican Senate did not agree with the treaty that Wilson had negotiated. And so even though Wilson had negotiated this with other foreign countries, the United States would never end up ratifying that treaty, and we never joined the League of Nations because our Senate did not want to. And in order for a treaty to become a law, it must be ratified by the Senate. So the Senate also, they provide what is known as advice and consent. So like I was kind of discussing with Mitch McConnell and President-elect Joe Biden's cabinet positions, the Senate is required for presidential appointments. So every single cabinet position requires a Senate confirmation. And then the same thing with justices. In order to appoint a justice to a federal court, the Senate must give a hearing, and then they must pass in the Senate. So the Senate has to vote, essentially saying, yes, we are allowing this person to hold this post. The Senate also chooses the vice president in an electoral college tie, and they act as the jury in trials of impeachment. So the House of Representatives, they bring up the articles of impeachment if they want to go after that. So with President Trump, there was an impeachment. The articles of impeachment were brought up in the House of Representatives. It passed the House of Representatives. It only needs a simple majority, so one vote over half, and then the individual is impeached. So the Democrats had control of the House of Representatives with the impeachment of President Trump, and they passed the articles of impeachment. So President Trump was impeached, but he was not removed from office. And to be removed from office, that's where the Senate comes in. And in the Senate, it requires a 2/3 majority. So not 51 senators, but it's about 67 senators need to vote in order to remove someone. Never in U.S. history has a sitting president been removed. We've had a couple of impeachments. We've had Andrew Johnson was impeached. Richard Nixon was impeached. Richard Nixon surely would have been removed from office. Or excuse me, I misspoke. Richard Nixon was not impeached. He resigned before it happened. But Richard Nixon would have been impeached and he would have been removed from office. He had meetings with Republican congressional leaders, and those Republican congressional leaders told him, "Hey, look, if it comes to it, we're going to vote to impeach and remove you." And so when he was told that, at that point he resigned. So Andrew Johnson has been impeached, and then Bill Clinton was impeached, and then Donald Trump was impeached as well. But no president has ever been removed from office. So powers of Congress. The most important power that Congress has is its ability to pass laws and to pass legislation. So they are not the only branch of government that plays a part in legislation being passed, but that is their most significant power. There's also in the Constitution, it lists the powers that Congress has. It's enumerated. I think there's like 18 enumerations of the powers of Congress. And they are quite substantial. Once again, this comes back to the Articles of Confederation, when it became apparent how weak the central government and the Congress was. It became quite obvious that it couldn't do much. And so in order for a central government to be effective, it needed to be given more power. And so the modern Congress that we have certainly has some more broad and expansive powers. Some areas that they also have some control over are things like economic policy. So once again, any bill dealing with taxes or revenue must originate in the House. They also have control to an extent over national security. They regulate trade with other countries. For example, they have committees that have oversight. They also play some role in foreign policy, most specifically ratifying treaties, and they also have some other powers as well in other areas of policy. Like I said, they have oversight. So what oversight is basically committees that are set up to ensure that the executive branch is behaving lawfully and appropriately. And so this is another check on the executive branch by the legislative branch. They get to have oversight and make sure that the executive branch is conducting themselves appropriately. And if they find any inappropriate action or illegal action, that's when they can the power that they have there, if they find anything like that, is impeachment and then removal. So like I said, they have committees and subcommittees that conduct hearings and investigation. They set the number of justices on the Supreme Court. They also create what are known as tribunals, or basically courts that are lower than the Supreme Court of the United States. They give advice and consent. They can also declare war. So in order for the president to engage our military forces, for the most part, there is some wiggle room. Some powers that the executive has where they can deploy, for example, Obama deployed bombing missions in the Middle East that did not have congressional, there wasn't a declaration of war, but because of the president's wartime authorities, there is some power that they have. But traditionally, in order to go to war, it requires a declaration of war, which is given by Congress. So apportionment. What apportionment is basically delegating how many seats each state gets in the House of Representatives. And so this is done with the census. The census is taken every 10 years. Although there's nothing that says that the census can be taken earlier than every 10 years. So it was conducted this past year in 2020. However, there was a lot of controversy surrounding the census in 2020. The Trump administration wanted to end the census early, and essentially the reason why they wanted to do that was because they didn't want to count people from that are really difficult to kind of count, and those people tend to vote more Democratic. And so this was kind of a political ploy that, like, well, if we don't count those people, then the seats like California or more liberal states will lose some of their power. I think it ended up going to the courts, and the court said that it could go on, that essentially if the census could end early, but then the agency that conducts the census came out recently, if I'm not mistaken, and said that they wouldn't be able to finish it on the timetable given. So the census is going to extend into President-elect Biden's term, to where I'm sure he'll want everybody counted. So, like I said, its representatives are reallocated based upon population growth. If there's stagnation or loss, some seats are won in some states, some states are lost, or some seats are lost in other states. There are two really important Supreme Court cases dealing with redistricting. And those are Baker v. Carr in 1961. This is a case that came out of Tennessee, and the Constitution had stipulated that districts need to be evenly drawn with regards to population. And so in Tennessee, there were some districts that the population was significantly larger than other districts. And although it hadn't ever been challenged in decades, when it was challenged in 61, the Supreme Court ruled that the districts in states must be equal with regards to representation or to population. In the Shaw v. Reno case, this deals with race, and it essentially says that what occurred. This is from North Carolina, and what happened was that there was an effort to get more African American representation. So a district was drawn in a really odd shape, essentially along like a highway, that tried to group a district where there was predominantly African American. And so this was a way to increase African American representation in Congress. However, the Supreme Court ruled that race or ethnicity or religion cannot be used as a reason for drawing districts or boundaries. So this redistricting, or what's also referred to as gerrymandering, often becomes highly, highly politicized. Oops. So here's a video that kind of explains what redistricting, or also known as gerrymandering, what it is and what it does.
So you want to know what gerrymandering is? First, let's start with Government 101. In the United States, each state elects a certain number of representatives based on the state's population. The larger your population, the more representatives you have. Each representative represents a district, or a geographical area including its voters. Ideally, we want to have a range of representatives who reflect the political views of the population across the state. But how do we decide who gets to vote for each representative? Let's look at an example. Suppose we have a very tiny state of 50 people. 30 of them belong to the blue party, and 20 belong to the red party. And just our luck, they all live in a nice even grid, with blues on one side of the state and reds on the other. Now, let's say we need to divide the state into 5 districts. Each district will send one representative to the House to represent the people. Fortunately, because our citizens live in a neatly ordered grid, it's easy to draw 5 lengthy districts, 2 for the reds and 3 for the blues. Voila! Perfectly proportional representation, just as the founders intended. Now, let's say instead that the blue party controls the state government, and they get to decide how the lines are drawn. Rather than draw districts horizontally, they draw them vertically, so that in each district there are 6 blues and 4 reds. With a comfortable blue majority in the state, each district elects a blue candidate to the House. The blues win 5 seats, and the reds don't get a single one. Well, finally, what if the red party controls the state government? The reds know they're at a numerical disadvantage. But with some creative boundary drawing, they can slice the blue population up such that they only get a majority in 2 districts. So despite making up 40% of the population, the Reds win 60% of the seats. Not bad. This process of redrawing district lines to give an advantage to one party over another is called gerrymandering, and it's nothing new. The term gerrymander is named after early 19th century Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry, who redrew the map of the Senate's districts in 1810 in order to weaken the opposing Federalist Party. Our example is, of course, a huge simplification. In the real world, people don't live in neatly ordered grids sorted by political party. But for politicians looking to give themselves an advantage at redistricting time, the process is exactly the same, and the consequences are very real. Gerrymandering is at least partly to blame for lopsided representation in the House seen in recent elections. And it's been argued by the president for political polarization, since representatives don't have to compromise hardline views in order to win seats.
So it's kind of blocked right here, so I can't quite read what I had in my notes. But so in 2011, I'll try to read this as best as I can. So this in the state of Wisconsin, the Republicans gained control of the state legislature, and remember, it is the state legislature that gets to draw these. There we go. I can just do high. That gets to draw these districts, and so in 2011, what happened in Wisconsin, the Republicans basically got together in it was a secret meeting in a map room, as they called it. There were no Democrats invited, and they redrew the lines for the upcoming elections, and they redrew them in a way that would be more favorable to them. So in 2012, the Republicans in Wisconsin received 47% of the vote, but they got 60 out of 99 seats. So I'm not very good at math. I've never have been, but that does not seem proportional to me. They won less than half the seats, and they get about a little less than 2/3 of, they receive about 47%, so less than 0.5% of the vote, yet they receive about 2/3 of the seats. Let's see. Okay. And maybe there we go. In 2014, the Republicans received 57% of the vote, and they got 64 out of 99 seats. In the 17 states where Republicans drew the maps, they received 53% of the vote, or the ballots casted, yet they earned 72% of the seats. So as you can see, that is not proportional. But I want to make clear, this is not only Republicans. The Democrats engage in this as well. And so the Democrats in the areas that they controlled, they received 56% of the votes, and they got 71% of the seats in the areas that they controlled. So this is not a partisan thing. Both the Democrats and Republicans engage in this. And the thing that's really bad is that it's not proportional, and it's degrading for democracy. Oftentimes what you have happen is that you make districts that polarize people. And because the representatives know that I don't need to change my views, because the way that this district is drawn is essentially going to guarantee my victory. In fact, what you're seeing happen is that liberal districts are becoming even more liberal. So the candidate that's further left is going to be more likely to win. And districts that have become more red, the candidate that's further right is going to win, because of the way that they're drawn, and it's based off of politics. It's not based off of just natural barriers. The types of districts are becoming polarized. So now we have less moderates in Congress, and so with less moderates, we have less people who are willing to compromise. And in the type of government that we have, in a democracy, you need to have significant amounts of compromise for things to work well, especially when there's a divided government, which we've had for the past 2 years. And I think the Georgia Republicans, the two Georgia Senate Republican nominees, I think they're going to win. And so I think we are going to have, on January 20th, we are going to have a Democratic executive, and then a legislature that is controlled on the House by the Democrats and the Senate by Republicans. So we're going to have a divided government again. And if we want government to work properly, there needs to be compromise. But especially with this gerrymandering going on, and simply the atmosphere and polarization in the United States politics for the past probably couple of decades, we're seeing less and less compromise and negotiations between the parties. And so it's really hampering government and what government can do. So the politics of redistricting. So like I said, redistricting is the lines of each district gets redrawn to make each congressional district roughly equal in size and population. Each state has their own laws regarding redistricting. It becomes highly political. Each side tries to gain an advantage. It's referred to as gerrymandering, like it's stated in the video, which is where you draw lines to favor one party over another instead of following the natural barriers or geographic features. Like I commented on, as a result, voting has become much more polarized in the United States Congress. So party leadership in the House of Representatives. So the leader of the House is known as the Speaker of the House. Like I said, that is Nancy Pelosi currently. The Speaker of the House is third in the line to the presidency. So it goes president, and then it goes vice president, and then it goes the Speaker of the House. The House Majority Leader, also referred to as the whip or the House Majority Whip, is the second in command in the House. They are chosen by members of the majority party, and what their job to do is basically to ensure party discipline, so that if there's a bill that comes forward that most of the party likes, it's the majority whip who tries to really rally the caucus and get everyone to vote on that bill. And they're chosen by the majority party, same way that the Speaker of the House is selected by the majority party. The minority has the House Minority Leader. They don't have a ton of power. Their job is basically what the whip's job is. So they try to rally and make sure that their caucus votes the way that they do. But like I said, other than that, the minority leadership tends to not have that much power. Party leadership in the Senate. So as I said earlier, the head of the U.S. Senate is the Vice President of the United States, but they are only involved if there is a 50-50 split in the House, or excuse me, in the Senate. If there's a 50-50 split, then the Vice President casts the deciding ballot. Other than that, they're not really too involved. The Senate Majority Leader is where most of the power in the Senate comes from. Once again, it is voted on by the majority party. The Senate Majority Leader holds the most power in the Senate. They are the head of the party in the majority, and they shape the legislative agenda, and they also determine, like I said before, what gets to come on the floor, what gets to be voted on, and what does not get to be voted on. So the committee system. Committees are used to divide workload. So this is a quote from former President Woodrow Wilson. It is not far from the truth to say that Congress in session is Congress on public exhibition, while Congress in its committee room is Congress at work. So what he was saying there was when there are public sessions being conducted, we see a lot of public theater or congressional theater. People are trying to they're trying to put on like a performance to please their constituency. And so if you ever watch a public congressional hearing, especially on something that is contentious, it's really partisan. And then from what we hear, though, is that when in closed hearings or in closed committee sessions, the behavior of the representatives is much calmer, and they're much more willing to work with each other. So committee chairs are the heads of those of the said committee. It's the leader of a congressional committee who has authority over the committee's agenda. So that the chair of a committee gets to decide what that committee's agenda is going to look like and what they are going to be involved with. In the House, most serve on one committee. That's because there are so many representatives. There are 435 representatives compared to only 100 senators. So senators, it's more common for them to serve on multiple committees because there's fewer of them, whereas in the House of Representatives, because there are so many people, they typically kind of serve on one committee. There are four types of committees: a standing, a joint, conference, and a select. So a standing is a permanent committee that is divided by policy areas. They also consider legislation and exercise oversight over bureaucratic agencies. They do things like recommend funding levels. A joint committee contains members of both chambers. So what that means is a joint committee has members of the House of Representatives, and it also has members of the United States Senate. They focus public attention on issues, and they also gather information for Congress. A conference is a temporary joint committee that resolves differences between the House and Senate on version bills. So before, we'll get into it later in the lecture, but a conference committee is basically, look, we need to hash out these differences that we have with the bill if we want to get a bill passed. So the House can introduce a bill and they'll pass it and it'll go to the Senate. And then the Senate will add something to that bill, or maybe they'll take away something they don't like. Well, okay, well, now it needs to go back to the House. And then maybe the House doesn't like what the Senate added, or it wants to add something more. So then it adds something or takes away something. Okay, well, now it needs to get back sent to the Senate. And so the conference committee is a really easy way to basically, in a more efficient manner, try to come to consensus on a piece of legislation. So what's ever holding up the bill being passed on to the executive to be signed into law, that's what a conference committee is for. A select or special committee is a temporary body or committee that is usually formed to conduct an investigation into an issue or into a crisis or into a scandal. And so, for example, when President Trump was impeached, that was a select committee. There was a whistleblower complaint, which the Democrats, at least in the House of Representatives, viewed as an abuse of power. And so this was seen as a scandal. And so this select committee conducted these hearings on the Ukraine scandal, as what it became to be known as. And then based off of that select committee's hearings and whatnot, they decided to impeach President Donald Trump. Congress. So both houses establish their own rules on behavior and punishments. So some punishments can be censure. That basically means like you take away somebody's ability to speak. You can be fined, and you can even be expelled. 15 members have been expelled, but 14 of them, it was for supporting the Confederacy, and the other one was for treason. So nobody's been expelled since right around the Civil War. We have had people, senators or representatives, censured, but we haven't had somebody expelled in a really long time. Currently, the breakdown in Congress is the Senate currently has control with 50 seats. The Democrats have 46 seats in the Senate, and there are 2 independents. But like I said, these 2 independents are Bernie Sanders from Vermont and Angus King. And these 2 vote Democrat overwhelmingly. So it's really 48-50. And then, like I said before, it's those 2 runoff Senate seats in Georgia that are going to determine who has the majority. Currently, the House of Representatives is under Democratic control. They have 222 seats to the Republicans' 209. I know that does not add up to 435. There are still a couple of seats that are being determined. So along with the rules and behavior, there's also norms. And what norms are unwritten rules of how members are supposed to act. And so the norms basically what they essentially are traditions. And a lot of the traditions in Congress are supposed to be built off of mutual respect. And so you're supposed to conduct yourself in a respectable manner, holding a respectable amount of decorum. But that does not always happen. And it can devolve. Congress can devolve pretty quickly into just a yelling match. And it's always odd to see, like, wow, these are, we tell our students, like, hey, you need to behave yourself appropriately. You need to conduct yourself in a respectful manner. You need to be respectful of others and their opinions. You need to engage with them. based off of substance. You shouldn't engage in name calling, but we don't always see that in the United States, especially the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives can become quite testy. So this is just a video of a hearing a couple of years ago, and just how quickly it devolves. There is a witness, and the witness basically just doesn't get to speak. The hearing was for that witness, but because of the behavior of our adults and the individuals who run the country, he didn't really get to speak.
You are under subpoena and are required to answer the question. Are you objecting to the question? If so, please state your objection.
Mr. Chairman, I object.
The gentleman, it does not have standing
Mr.
to
Chair-
object. There is no
Point of order.
No point of order here. Good morning. Committees on the judiciary.
Point of
Do
order.
you understand that?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The question is directed to the witness.
And I have a point of order before he answers the question.
The point of order is not well taken until
You don't know what the point of order is. You can't say it's not well taken.
the point of order. The witness will answer the question.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Let me continue.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order. I believe there's a point of order that's been raised.
Gentleman has not stated a valid
I
point
will
of order.
appeal the ruling of the chair in that case.
Nonetheless,
Are you just going to make up rules as we go along?
it is not a valid point of order. The
And I
chair
appeal
can't
has
the
just
ruling
already.
of the
repress
chair
it,
on that
Mr. Chairman,
question,
because you
on that
don't-
question, on that ruling.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman is not in order.
That may be, but I appeal your ruling.
The gentleman is not recognized.
I
Point of
insist on
parliamentary
appealing the
inquiry,
ruling of the
Mr. Chairman.
chair. That
Point
my
of parliamentary
order was
inquiry.
not in.
Parliamentary inquiry. Got it, you remember that?
Parliamentary inquiry.
Parliamentary inquiry. Mr.
Parliamentary inquiry.
A parliamentary inquiry is
Mr.
not in
Bannon,
order. Motion is not germane. And the gentleman from Maryland, Mr.
I
Cummings,
move to
is
table the
recognized.
ruling of the chair.
All those in favor of tabling the appeal, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The chair, the ayes have
Mr.
it.
Chairman, I asked for a recorded
Chairman.
vote.
Point of
I asked for a
parliamentary inquiry,
recorded
Mr. Chairman.
vote.
Mr. Chairman, point of parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman's point of order is not well taken.
It's right on point.
No, it's not.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman will state his point of order.
Point of order.
It is not a point of order.
Point of order.
Point of order. Point of order. Point of order. Point of order. Point of order.
That is not a proper point of order. The gentleman will suspend.
The
Gentlewoman
witnesses
will
have the right.
The gentlewoman will suspend. The gentlewoman will suspend. The gentlewoman will suspend.
His time has expired, Mr. Chairman. By 2.5 minutes.
Gentleman is not recognized.
And the chairman is not being proper.
The chairman is being proper.
Mr. Chairman, I think you have no choice but to recognize such a motion.
I do not.
I raise my point of order and I insist on it.
What is the point of order?
I move to subpoena Steve Bannon.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Second.
You're not recognized for that purpose.
So as you guys can see, our representatives don't always conduct themselves in the most respectable manner. Okay, so I'm going to end it here. There will be a second part of the lecture that deals with the legislative process, but this is where I'm going to end it today.